Okay students, so here we've got the last of our little revision presentations on the policies. Just a quick reminder, there are two demand side, there's our supply side policy. When analysing, supply side initially shifts in long run aggregate supply, initially shifts in aggregate demand. If we're evaluating, let's think about how it affects the supply side. Let's think about how this affects the demand side, or how we can bring in those other two policies. And remember, it's quite good to say it depends upon what's happening with the other policies and how we use those to achieve the objectives. So here's an example of a question around fiscal policy. Even though it's not mentioned in the question, the impact of government policies, because it refers to the budget deficit, it's initially asking you to look at fiscal policy. So a good key here is to define a budget deficit, which is where government spending is greater than tax revenue. And if it comes to fiscal policy, the way we could do that is to reduce government spending or increase taxes, or do both. Now, the impact of that would be to reduce aggregate demand. So we can use that graph to analyse some of the costs and benefits, some of the impacts, because we have a positive in terms of reduction in the price level, which may help us to achieve our macroeconomic objective of price stability, but we're going to lose our macroeconomic objective of economic growth as growth slows, and we're likely to see a rise in unemployment as businesses get less revenue, as consumers spend less. So just to analyse that in terms of aggregate demand, within the C, the I, the G and the X minus M, we've got lower level of government spending, lower level of consumer spending due to higher taxes. So that's the impacts that we could have there. There is one potential positive impact we don't show it on the graph, and that is an improving trade balance, or an improving current account on the balance of payments, because as disposable incomes or incomes fall, then people spend less on normal imports. And if they spend less on normal imports or luxury imports, then the value of X may be greater, or it might just increase in relation to the value of M. So if the value of M falls, it may lead to a situation where the value of X is greater than it. So we've got our improving trade balance there. In terms of it depends upon, so you could just say it depends upon the type of government spending. If it's short-term or current spending, so just things like wages, it'll reduce aggregate demand. But if it's capital spending, things like infrastructure, then we might also get a fall in long-run aggregate supply, and that'll have an additional negative of putting up the price level. So that would be an example of cost push inflation due to the fall in aggregate supply, and that could be worse for the long term for the economy. You could also evaluate it in terms of, there's other ways to solve it. So one of the ways to solve it would be to grow the economy. So you could reduce interest rates, and business consumers would spend more, so they'd get more income tax. So there'd be an increase in tax revenue. There would be less people on job seekers allowance and other benefits, so that would reduce government spending, and also it might encourage businesses to invest, so the corporation tax might go up, and then you get the ability to solve the deficit indirectly without having to use fiscal policy to do that. The next slide shows some similar questions around fiscal policy. First one is evaluate the extent to which demand side policies. So you could choose fiscal, you could choose monetary. If you had time, you could do one fiscal and one monetary policy and try to link that into a target. So fiscal policy to reduce unemployment, monetary policy to achieve price stability, and then maybe a reason why each one might not be successful. So monetary policy, potentially people already in a lot of debt, don't take out any extra loans. Fiscal policy, it may be that you reduce income tax to try and encourage people to spend more, but businesses don't have confidence in the economy, so they're not going to invest more. Evaluate the impacts on an economy of a reduction in the top rate of income tax. Well, there you would have an increase in aggregate demand that you could talk about, as a tax cut should lead to that. So you'd have economic growth and a reduction in employment, but you may argue that those people would have a higher marginal propensity to save, or a higher average propensity to save, which would then mean that that money just wouldn't find its way into the economy. So maybe 100% saved and there'd be no impact. Or you could look at it in terms of failing another objective, which is it would probably increase inequality, as the rich would get richer and own more wealth, and the poor would stay where they are. And the last one, evaluate the effectiveness of a significant increase in government spending to improve the UK's trade deficit. Well, you could do this one in terms of subsidies on one side, reducing cost of production for a business, allowing them to increase output, and that would allow them to reduce the price of exports, so exports become cheaper. But you could also then do it as in terms of spending on something like education. That makes people more skilled, which allows productivity to rise, but also it increases the quality of UK goods. This then gives you the ability to evaluate them against each other, because the price one might only be short term, whereas improving quality would be a long term one. But when it does come to trade balance, it depends heavily on economic growth in the markets that we export to. So in our export markets, and even if our goods are becoming better quality and cheaper, we still need people's incomes to be rising abroad, because the goods that we sell in the UK, or the things we export, tend to be normal goods or luxury goods rather than inferior goods.